Warning: based on a true story. Parental advisory. Not suitable for children. This video is a dramatized retelling of a real-life incident. It contains graphic and intense content, including mature themes and language, violent acts and imagery, shocking and disturbing events. Parents, please note, this content is not suitable for children. We strongly advise against allowing minors to watch this video, as it may cause emotional distress or trauma. Viewer discretion is advised. This content is intended for adult audiences only. If you are easily disturbed or triggered by graphic content, please exercise caution before watching. Ghost or guardian angel. The mysterious light of Grayson Crossing. In the heart of Yorkshire, where rolling hills are cloaked in a perpetual mist and the whispers of history linger in the air, lies a railway crossing unlike any other. This is Grayson Crossing, a place where the veil between the living and the dead seems impossibly thin. A place where countless stories of the unexplainable echo through generations. To the townsfolk, it is a name spoken in hushed tones, laced with reverence and fear. To the weary travellers, it is a crossroads of fate. Grayson Crossing is more than a railway junction. It is a theatre of mystery and tragedy, a stage for the unexplainable. Some speak of a ghost, bound by sorrow to the tracks where his life was tragically taken. Others believe in something far more divine, a guardian angel who watches over those who pass through the crossing, protecting them from unseen dangers. And then there are those who simply wonder, is it possible for a single soul to linger between two worlds, forever bound to an act of heroism? Tonight, we uncover the chilling story of Albert Grayson, a signalman whose life was cut short in an act of unparalleled bravery. His light, they say, still shines, a beacon for the lost and the living. But before we delve into this tale of tragedy, heroism, and the supernatural, let's pause for a moment. Did you know that you can take this story with you wherever you go? At Storyteller Pro, we bring you tales like this one in podcast format, perfect for those quiet moments when you want to immerse yourself in the mysteries of the past. Imagine listening to this story as you drift off to sleep, the whispers of history guiding your dreams. Or perhaps on a brisk walk through the countryside, as the chill of the air makes Albert Grayson's tale all the more vivid. Our podcast allows you to turn everyday moments into extraordinary experiences, whether you're commuting, cooking, or simply unwinding after a long day. And for our listeners traveling on the road, riding metros, or waiting in quiet rooms, let our stories become your companions. For the elderly, our podcasts transform idle hours into moments of curiosity and wonder, bringing history and mystery to life. At Storyteller Pro, every story is more than just words. It's an experience waiting for you to uncover. But now we take you back to the late 19th century, to the quiet, mist-covered countryside of Yorkshire. A snowstorm is brewing, and in the distance the faint glow of a lantern flickers through the night. This is where Albert Grayson's story begins. Was he merely a man driven by duty, or has his spirit become something far greater, a protector of those who pass through his crossing? Let us find out. The tragic tale of Albert Grayson. In the biting winter of December 1887, Yorkshire was blanketed in snow. The countryside, though serene, masked the dangers that lurked within its icy grip, and in the heart of this storm, Albert Grayson, a humble signalman, prepared to face a moment that would etch his name into legend. Albert Grayson was more than a signalman. Known for his unwavering dedication, he had become a beloved figure in the small railway village near Grayson Crossing. Whether he was sharing his modest lunches with stray dogs or helping elderly passengers board the train with care, Albert's acts of kindness were woven into the fabric of the community. To the villagers, Albert was more than a railway worker. He was a guardian, a protector. He knew the railway better than anyone, and his presence brought comfort to those who travelled its tracks. But on this particular winter night, a vicious snowstorm raged. Albert sat in his signal box, his lantern casting a dim glow over the frosted glass windows. Outside, the world was white and silent, save for the whispered whispers of the night. As he peered into the storm, something caught his eye. Shadowy figures moving near the tracks. Albert's heart sank. In the storm, he spotted figures hunched near the tracks. Their intentions became chillingly clear. They were saboteurs, loosening the rails in a plan that would spell disaster for the passenger train barreling toward the crossing. Albert knew there was no time to call for help. Every second mattered. Grabbing his lantern, he threw on his coat and spinged his skin as snowflakes blurred his vision. But Albert pressed on, his lantern swaying with each step as he made his way toward the tracks. Waved his lantern desperately, hoping to signal the train and warn the passengers of the impending danger. The storm raged around him, but Albert was undeterred. In that moment, he was no longer just a signalman, he was a hero fighting against time. The saboteurs, startled by Albert's arrival, fled into the night, but the train, hurtling toward the saboteur's section of track, was still at risk. Albert stood on the tracks, waving the lantern with all his might, a lone figure in the storm. The train screeched to a halt just in time, sparing the lives of hundreds of passengers. But, in his heroic effort, Albert paid the ultimate price. The impact of the locomotive struck him down, his lantern clattering to the icy ground. When dawn broke, villagers found Albert's body frozen in the snow. His lantern, remarkably, was still clutched in his hand, its flame long extinguished, but its light forever etched in their memories. Albert Grayson had given his life to save others. The villagers mourned the loss of a man they called their protector, their friend. But his story did not end that day. It was only the beginning. Shortly after his death, strange occurrences began to unfold at the crossing. Travelers and villagers alike reported seeing a flickering light near the tracks, swaying gently as though carried by an unseen hand. Was it Albert's spirit still fulfilling his duty to protect the railway, or was it something divine, an angel sent to guard the crossing from further harm? The villagers didn't have answers, but they knew one thing: the light of Albert Grayson's lantern would never fade. The story of Albert Grayson grew into legend passed down through generations. To this day, travelers speak of the light at Grayson Crossing, a flickering glow that appears on misty nights, guiding trains and saving lives. Whether it is the spirit of a man bound by duty or an angel watching over the railway, Albert's sacrifice lives on. Albert Grayson's lantern continues to burn, not with fire, but with the memory of a man whose bravery transcended life itself. The crossing remains forever haunted by a light that flickers between the realms of the living and the dead. The first paranormal encounter. It was a fog-laden night, thick with the damp chill of the Yorkshire countryside. As William Carter, a seasoned locomotive pilot, guided his freight train through familiar tracks. A veteran of the rails, William had heard the whispered tales of Grayson Crossing, stories of strange lights and restless spirits. But he dismissed them as superstitions, spun to pass long nights. Yet on this night, beneath the suffocating veil of mist, his skepticism would be tested. William, settled in the cab, glanced ahead into the white haze. The beam of the train's headlamp stretched out like a feeble sword, barely cutting through the dense fog. His hands gripped the controls firmly, years of experience calming any sense of unease as the train moved steadily toward Grayson Crossing. Then he saw it, a light, a faint at first, swaying rhythmically in the fog, appeared ahead. William leaned forward, narrowing his eyes against the gloom. At first, he thought it was a malfunctioning signal, perhaps flickering in the stormy conditions. But something about its movement unsettled him. It wasn't static, like a signal. It seemed alive, shifting unnaturally. The light began to dance, moving across the tracks in the way that made William's instincts tingle. His gut told him something was wrong. Slowing the train, he squinted into the mist, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. William's heart sank as the train's headlamp illuminated the danger ahead. Just beyond the light lay a section of track, bent and twisted as if wrenched apart by some unseen force. His breath caught as he realized the truth. The tracks had been sabotaged, likely by bandits seeking to derail the train for its valuable freight. William's emergency stop prevented disaster, the train screeching to a halt mere feet from the mangled rails. As he steadied himself, he peered into the fog, his hands gripping the edge of the cab, and then he saw it. A figure emerged from the mist, a man tall and silent, holding a lantern that glowed with an otherworldly light. William's pulse quickened as the figure paused, raising the lantern slightly as though in acknowledgement. It nodded once, a gesture of reassurance, before dissolving into the fog, leaving only shadows in its wake. For a long moment, William sat frozen in the cold night air. The light had vanished, but its presence lingered in his mind. He shook his head, unsure of what he had just witnessed. Shaken, William finally guided the train forward, carefully maneuvering around the damaged tracks before arriving at the station. Still rattled, he wasted no time reporting the incident to the station master, his voice trembling as he recounted what had happened.
There was a light, a man with a lantern. He saved us. He showed me the tracks before it was too late.
The station master's face darkened.
"You owe your life to Grayson,"
he said simply, his voice heavy with meaning.
Grayson, you mean the signalman? I thought that was just a story.
"It's no story. Albert Grayson gave his life to save others on that very crossing, and it seems he's still not done protecting us."
From that night on, William Carter was no longer a skeptic. He became a believer, his story adding to the legend of Grayson Crossing. Was the figure he saw truly Albert Grayson, the signalman whose lantern had once saved lives at the cost of his own? Or was it something greater, an angel guarding the innocent? Whatever the answer, one thing was certain: the light of Grayson Crossing remained, a beacon of hope and mystery, swaying forever in the fog. The pregnant woman's rescue. They waited anxiously for her to regain consciousness. When Mary awoke, she described what had happened in a trembling voice.
I remembered the fall.
She said,
Everything went black, but then I felt warmth, and I opened my eyes to see a man standing over me. He held a lantern, its glow so bright it chased away the cold. He didn't speak, but I felt safe, like he was watching over me. When I blinked, he was gone, but the light, it stayed with me until I saw the villagers.
The villagers exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of disbelief and awe. Whispers filled the room. Some said it was Albert Grayson, the guardian of the tracks whose lantern had saved countless lives. Others believed it was divine intervention, a miracle meant to protect mother and child. Despite her injuries, Mary and her baby survived, a miracle many attributed to Albert's protective spirit. Her story spread quickly, adding to the legend of Grayson Crossing. The villagers, who had once feared the light, now saw it as a symbol of hope and protection. A closer look at the moment of rescue. Some said the light was warm, almost alive, radiating a presence that banished fear. Was it truly Albert Grayson, bound to the crossing by his heroic death? Or was it something greater, a divine force that chose the tracks as its vessel? The answer may never be known. For Mary, the encounter remained etched in her memory. Years later, she would tell her son, born on that fateful night, of the man with the lantern. She spoke of his quiet, comforting presence and the glow that surrounded her like a shield. To this day, villagers still speak of that night. They recall how the light guided them, how it seemed to act with purpose, leading them to Mary in her moment of greatest need. And so the legend of Albert Grayson grew, not just as a protector of the tracks, but as a guardian of all who passed through his crossing. The bandits' justice. It was a night shrouded in complete darkness, the kind that seemed to swallow sound and sight. On this moonless evening, a group of bandits crept along the railway near Grayson Crossing, their shadows blending seamlessly with the void. Their target, a mail train rumored to carry a trove of valuables, rolled steadily toward its impending fate. The bandits worked quickly, their tools clinking softly as they loosened the bolts on the tracks. They whispered to one another in hushed tones, their breath visible in the chill air. Confidence grew among them as the minutes ticked by, their plan unfolding seamlessly under the cover of darkness.
Hurry it up.
One of them muttered, glancing nervously toward the tracks.
The train will be here any minute.
Relax.
Another replied, his voice tinged with arrogance.
By the time they realize what's happened, we'll be long gone.
But their confidence shattered in an instant. Their tools clattered to the ground as the men shielded their eyes from the searing light. Panic set in as the sound of an approaching train grew louder, the earth beneath them trembling as though something massive was bearing down upon them. Yet when they looked toward the tracks, they saw nothing. No train, no engine, only the overwhelming brightness of a lantern's glow. One of the bandits stumbled backward, his voice trembling as he shouted,
"What the hell is that? Where's the train?"
Then, through the brilliance of the light, they saw him, A man standing on the tracks, holding a lantern that seemed to burn brighter than any flame. His figure was pale, almost translucent, but his presence was undeniable.
We saw him.
One of the bandits later confessed, his voice shaking as he recounted the encounter.
A man with a lantern, pale as a ghost. He didn't say a word, but his eyes, it was like he could see right through us.
The light intensified, disorienting the men further. It seemed to pulse, chasing them as they scrambled to escape the tracks. Some tripped over their own feet, others dropped their tools entirely. The sound of the phantom train's rumble seemed to follow them, growing louder with every step they took away from the scene. In their blind panic, the bandits fled into the woods, their breath coming in ragged gasps as they tripped over roots and branches. But their escape was short-lived. Waiting for them just beyond the tree line were the authorities, alerted to their plot by an anonymous source. The saboteurs were swiftly apprehended, their plans thwarted before they could bring harm to the train and its passengers. Later investigations revealed that the bandits' sabotage would have caused a catastrophic derailment. The mail train, carrying not just valuables but also essential supplies and passengers, would have met a devastating end. To the villagers, the conclusion was clear. Albert Grayson had intervened once more, his lantern a beacon of justice and protection. A closer look at the encounter. The bandits' story spread quickly, adding yet another layer to the legend of Grayson Crossing. Some believed Albert's spirit had manifested to protect the train, his presence fueled by a duty that transcended death. Others whispered that the light wasn't Albert at all, but an angel guarding the railway, using his image to strike fear into wrongdoers. The villagers, hearing of the encounter, expressed little sympathy for the bandits. Instead, their admiration for Albert's sacrifice only deepened.
He saved us in life, and now he saves us in death.
One elderly villager said, his voice thick with emotion,
Albert Grayson isn't just a man, he's a guardian.
Conclusion of the bandit's tale. Was the light a ghostly apparition, an angel, or something beyond human understanding? The truth remains as shrouded as the fog that clings to Grayson Crossing. But one thing is certain. The bandits were not the first to face Albert's light, and they would not be the last. His lantern continues to shine, a symbol of justice and protection, illuminating the darkness for all who pass through. Paranormal investigations. The legend of Grayson Crossing had spread far and wide, capturing the imaginations of believers and skeptics alike. It was only a matter of time before paranormal investigators arrived, armed with state-of-the-art equipment and a relentless curiosity to uncover the truth. These were seasoned professionals, accustomed to the eerie and unexplained. But what they encountered at Grayson Crossing left even the most hardened among them questioning everything. The team began their work on a moonless night, the railway tracks stretching into the fog like veins through the land. Their gear? Electromagnetic field detectors, thermal cameras, and audio recorders was arranged meticulously, each piece ready to capture the unexplainable.
Just another ghost story.
One investigator remarked as he set up the camera, his voice laced with doubt.
Let's see if this light shows up tonight.
Even ghost stories come from somewhere.
Eleanor Price replied, her tone calm but curious.
Let's keep an open mind.
For hours, the investigators waited, their breath visible in the frigid air. The fog hung low, wrapping the crossing in an eerie stillness. At first, there was nothing. just the occasional crackle of static from the audio recorders and the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. Then, as the clock crept past midnight, the air seemed to shift.
Did you hear that?
One of the team members whispered, his voice barely audible over the hiss of the recorder. The faint words, chilling and clear, seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once.
Stay back.
The voice repeated, its tone neither threatening nor welcoming, just a warning, heavy with meaning. Moments later, the cameras captured what defied logical explanation. A faint, swaying light appeared along the tracks, its glow golden yet cold, like the flame of an otherworldly lantern. The light moved slowly, rhythmically, as though carried by an invisible hand. The team watched in stunned silence as the light hovered over the rails before vanishing into the fog as quickly as it had appeared. Then came the most chilling moment of the night. Eleanor Price, one of the lead investigators, ventured closer to the signal box. She had always prided herself on her composure, her ability to remain calm even in the face of the unexplained. But what she experienced that night shook her to her core.
I was inspecting the old signal box.
Eleanor later recounted, her voice trembling as she relived the moment.
It was quiet, almost too quiet, and the air was freezing. Then I felt it. A hand. Cold, but not icy, gripped my shoulder. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't trying to harm me. It felt, protective, like someone was standing behind me, watching over me.
Eleanor turned quickly, but there was no one there. The room was empty, save for the swaying shadow of the lantern light filtering through the frosted glass.
I wanted to be frightened,
she said,
but I wasn't. It felt like he wanted me to know he was still there, still watching.
The team continued their investigation, documenting everything they could. But as the night wore on, it became clear that what they had witnessed wasn't just a series of strange occurrences. It was a message. The whispers, the light, and even the touch were all signs pointing to something far beyond their understanding. Eleanor's reflection.
I've investigated hundreds of sites.
Eleanor said later, her tone softer than usual.
But Grayson Crossing is different. It's not just haunted, it's protected. Whatever is there, it's watching over this place. And maybe, just maybe, it doesn't want to be disturbed.
The findings of the investigators, though chilling, were inconclusive. But for those who believed in the legend of Albert Grayson, no further proof was needed. The light, the whispers, the protective hand, all pointed to one truth. Grayson Crossing was not just a railway, it was a place where the veil between the living and the dead had grown impossibly thin, guarded by its spirit whose duty extended far beyond the grave. Conclusion of the tragic tale. The stories of Grayson Crossing are more than just tales of the unexplained. They are a tapestry of hope, fear, and wonder. Albert Grayson, the humble signalman who gave his life to save countless others, has become a legend, a figure who blurs the lines between the paranormal and the divine. To some, Albert is a ghost, tethered to the place of his tragic death by an unfulfilled duty. His lantern, they say, continues to swing in the misty darkness, a silent sentinel watching over the railway he once protected. His presence is seen not as a curse, but as a solemn reminder of sacrifice and courage, a spirit that refuses to rest while others are at risk. But for others, Albert is something far greater, a guardian angel whose light pierces through the darkest nights. They see his actions not as those of a restless soul, but as divine intervention, a miracle that turns tragedy into salvation. From warning engineers of danger to guiding villagers through the storm, his light is a symbol of protection, a beacon that reassures all who see it that they are not alone. Even today, the light of Grayson Crossing continues to appear, a golden glow swaying in the mist as though carried by unseen hands. Travelers speak of its comforting presence, its ability to avert disaster and guide the lost. The villagers, who once feared the crossing's strange phenomena, now revere it, lighting candles on stormy nights in memory of their protector. Albert Grayson's story transcends time. It is a tale not just of one man's sacrifice, but of the enduring power of the human spirit. His lantern, whether ghostly or divine, has become a symbol of hope. Its light shining as a reminder that courage and selflessness can leave a mark that not even death can erase. Perhaps we will never truly know the nature of the light at Grayson Crossing. Is it Albert's spirit, forever bound to the railway, fulfilling a duty he could not abandon? Or is it something beyond our understanding, a force of good, manifesting through the echoes of his sacrifice? Whatever the truth may be, Albert Grayson's legacy endures. His light continues to shine, a beacon that cuts through the darkness, guiding travelers and reminding us all of the enduring strength of duty, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bond of the human spirit. The end. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the mysteries of Grayson Crossing. At Storyteller Pro, we bring you captivating tales of bravery, mystery, and the unexplained. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to uncover hidden legends and share them with the world. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and remember, not all mysteries are meant to be solved. Some are meant to be cherished. We extend our gratitude to viewers from across the globe: America, Australia, the UK, Europe, Germany, India, Asia, Japan, North America, and beyond. Your support inspires us to keep sharing these unforgettable tales. At Storyteller Pro, our mission is to bring you the stories that linger in the shadows of history, haunting and inspiring an unforgettable